Jasmine.
Hi, Tiffany. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thank you so much for having me today.
Of course, I'm excited to have you here with the first interview with the Black Girl Mentor podcast. You holding up okay during this coronavirus?
I am safe and healthy. How about you?
I'm the same, so I cannot complain. I mean, there's many things to complain about, but
we don't. But we choose not to.
Exactly. No need to do that. Well, again, so glad you're here with me. If you're okay with it, I want to just go ahead and get right into it.
Sure.
All right. Well, I am a big proponent of people defining themselves for themselves. So if you could just tell the people who you are, what you do, what you're about.
Sure. Well, some of that is to be discovered. I'm always in a process of self-reflection and changing and evolving. But I am Jasmine Omorogbe. I am a strategist and a consultant in my professional and personal career life. I am all about helping others enhance and enrich who they are, right? So if I think to my strengths quest, I'm a developer, a maximizer, and a ranger, all about positivity. Like those are the qualities. I've taken the test twice, and those same things kind of came through. So I'm all about helping others maximize what they have to achieve the goals that they're interested in. So I do that through two vehicles mainly. One is through education. I have worked in college admissions offices. I worked in college retention and persistence, and then also through career coaching. I've been working in career centers and with career places or folks for about 13 years now. So in my professional life, I work with universities and colleges, and I consult with them as they look at ways to help make things better for students. In my personal life, I help people with their resumes, cover letters, school applications, kind of everything. But I'm all about helping people assess where they are and then how they get to the next steps. And in terms of my personal demographic information, I'm a Minnesotan, which I know surprises many people. I was born and raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota, was there for about 25 years. I went to undergrad there, and then I left and went to Boston, Raleigh, North Carolina, Virginia, and now I live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So I'm happy that I've been able to build community in every one of those places and be able to find mentors and mentees and just have a lot of folks supporting my journey, and then folks whose journey I can support throughout that time.
Yeah, so we actually connected through your stop in Virginia.
Yeah. And we actually connected because of Tiffany Davis, a Black girl mentor of mine at the time, and said, "Hey, Tiffany," and then we connected through that.
Exactly. Yes, I was going to share that story. I was like, it's so funny how we even connected. Was, in my opinion, a Black girl mentor kind of moment. I was at a conference and I met Tiffany Davis in a Starbucks that was in the hotel, and she saw where I was working at the time and mentioned that, hey, I have a colleague who just started there. And I'm like, really? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, I think I know all the Black women where I work. So who could this person be? And she told me your name. And of course, as soon as I got back to campus, I reached out. So, but yeah, so thankful for that connection. And I don't even know how many years later, we're now doing this. So, but I say all that to say that, when I'm thinking about putting this podcast together and, who would be great to bring on and kind of share their perspectives. Of course, you came through. And a big thing is that, people see mentor and they think about it in a very traditional way, this mentor-mentee relationship. And I don't necessarily see it as just that. When I think about this platform, I think about it in terms of how do we treat one another? How do we make connections with folks? How do we live as in terms of lifestyle? In those connections. But I'm curious for you, how do you see mentorship and how has it kind of shown up or how does it play out in your life?
Mm-hmm. Well, first, thank you for creating this platform, and I love what you're trying to do or what you are doing and watching it grow. Mentorship, I think, is so key and so important, especially for those who are in underrepresented groups. So we're talking about Black women specifically here because there are so many ways that institutional and structural racism, sexism, classism have worked their ways against us. And we all know about intersectional, conversations and intersectional identities, right? We're kind of at the crossroads of those who are oftentimes not on the oppressed side or not on the privileged side when we think about those kind of institutional barriers that are there. So I think it's even more important that Black women specifically are able to seek and find mentors and to also mentor those who are coming behind them. So when I think about mentorship, I recognize that it's something that's critical, but that it has multiple layers to it in different pieces. And so one thing that I learned a few years back, I don't even remember where, but it was very important, was the distinction between a mentor and then maybe a champion or a sponsor, as some people call them. And so in my opinion, the difference that I see between those two is that a mentor is someone who's really helping you prepare for the next steps, helping you think critically on the larger scale, the philosophical scale. And then the sponsor or a champion is someone who can actually take you there. Like, hey, I have a job opportunity, come work for me. Like someone who can really put you at the table, right? So the mentor prepares you to be at the table whenever that opportunity comes. The sponsor, the champion, is creating that opportunity and bringing you there. I also think that mentorship, like you were talking about, is kind of we think of it in an imbalanced way of I am the expert, you are the person who does not know, right? But how do we, what I want to do, or what I try to do, is to cultivate more of a balanced perspective, because I think that no matter how many years of expertise I have in one capacity, there are still tons of things that I do not know. So in what ways can my mentorship relationships be balanced in that I'm learning from my mentee and my mentee is learning from me? So I have folks in my life right now who I know I've been in the workforce for 10, 12 years, whatever it is, a while, right? So I know maybe more about resumes, I maybe know more about cover letters, but I don't know how to use TikTok. And I have a mentee who's like, you should do this, and you should try this. And I'm like, okay. Or she's like, you should watch this show. And I'm like, okay. But she's helping keep me in the loop in terms of pop culture and things that I need to know to not be antiquated and out of touch with reality, the current reality that's here. But I do believe we should strive to have mentors in our lives, champions, sponsors in our lives. I think a balance of both are necessary, but I also think that any relationship should be symbiotic. You should be getting and giving. And it may be imbalanced at specific times or points in life, but overall, I think both people should benefit from the mentor-mentee relationship, because if not, then I think that's where things fall apart. I've had, relationships that start strong and then they kind of fizzle out. Well, because maybe we're both not getting something from this.
Yeah.
And so you have to make sure that it's effective and efficient for both people to be a part of it. So those are when I think about mentorship, I have mentors, I have mentees. It's played a huge role in my life and how I see my responsibilities to others as well, because people have given of their time, of their money, of their resources and talent to help make me better. And I want to do that same thing for other people as well.
Yeah, that's actually a really good kind of segue into the next question is, can you talk about maybe your first encounter with mentorship? Like, what was your first experience like? Who was it with? And kind of what did you get out of that experience?
Sure. So going way back, way back when I was 5 years old, that's when I first had the woman I would consider to be my first mentor. And my mom back in Minneapolis had a sewing business, and she was an entrepreneur on a main thoroughfare there. And there's a woman who used to come in, and she was a white older woman at the time. And my mom I'm an only child, so she had all my drawings and my pictures up, and I was always there at the shop with her. And the woman took a liking to me, saw something in me, and she began to be a mentor. So what she would do, she would pick me up. We would go all kinds of places. She would introduce me to her family. She would take me to her house. And I remember her house being so fancy and so nice when I was little. And it's like, this is different from our house. And she was a successful woman. She had a consulting business. She had opened a school. And it was just amazing for me to be around her, even as a young, 5-year-old. And we still have a relationship to this day. So she's been a mentor since that time. But she also was the one who gave me my first computer, like the big, giant, clunky ones, right? Back in way, like the first computers that were out. She gave that to me. She also put $2,000 in a savings account for me. Right. So she was not only just like, hey, let me, she sold into my life in ways that were really tangible, in addition to the more skill building and being a good role model for me. So her and my mom became friends, and then she took a liking to me, and she became a mentor. And then over time, there's been times where I come back and she always wants to just hear about my life, and she's so nice and sweet, but it's also like she's had a big impact in exposing me to different things, because the places that she picked me up and took me to different museums or to different outings, different neighborhoods even, I think a big part of people growing is broadening their horizons, and a big part of it is exposure, right? If I was not exposed to certain things, or they say you can't be what you can't see. So if no one in my current community was living in these nice, beautiful houses in this neighborhood, her even just taking me to her house and letting me know, like, this exists. And because it exists, you can have this. And now you have to figure out what to do to get to this point. But that on the most basic level, the things that she exposed me to started me on an upward trajectory. And hey, I want a house like that. What do I have to get that? You know, that sort of thing. So I'm really grateful that she took up her time and shared me with her friends and family. Like, that was really, really nice. And she didn't have to. Like, she didn't know my mom. She didn't, my mom was sewing her clothes. She didn't have to do any of that. And she took the time to do it. And that's always, again, something, part of the reason why I feel responsible, or why I enjoy giving back to others, because so many people have done that for me.
Yeah, I love that. So, you kind of described who you are, what you're about, what you do. But my question for you is, like, as a Black woman, you've kind of had some very unique experiences. You mentioned you're from Minnesota. And just kind of other things I know about you is that, you went to Harvard for graduate school, and you've from, your kind of religious background a little bit, right? So kind of having some of those like unique experiences, like, how did mentorship show up for you, or did it at all in those kind of unique, instances throughout your life?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Mentorship has been a part of my life at every stage, in every city, in every experience. So growing up, I was raised in the church. A lot of church people that I used to connect with are still connected to me to this day. I had mentors in the church. There was a man named Leonard Kane, and he took a liking to me, and he was really mentoring me and learning more about how to help others. I used to teach children's church, right? Like, so Sunday school, but it was throughout the actual church service. So I used to do that. He would show me, guide me, like, just watching him and even his wife at the time. She taught me how to do makeup, and she taught me, hey, make sure you do this, like, hygiene stuff. Like, here, you're a big girl, but you got to make sure you always look good. Like, these stuff about like personal type of things. Yeah. So even throughout my time in the church, there was her, there was Mary Anderson, there was a ton of people who took time to say, like, we see you, we recognize that you have some skills. We want to refine and enhance those skills through mentorship. So in the church, I had folks to look up to. At school, I had people I could look up to. Maybe not in the same way. I never had like a Black teacher or anything growing up. I didn't have Black women necessarily, but there were people maybe who worked in my school, who I said, okay, I like what she's doing, or she's a Black person who exists in this structure. There's some type of role model relationship there. At Harvard, definitely, Harvard. Dr. Bridget Terry Long, she's an amazing, amazing Black woman. She is now the dean of the Harvard Graduate School of Education. At that time, she was a professor, and she was working with Obama. And she's like, oh yeah, I can't teach class today. I have to go to the White House. It's like, okay. Oh my gosh, right? But her class was also difficult. She was not playing games about like holding everybody to a very high standard. So a lot of people were intimidated by her class or intimidated by her, but I also got the opportunity to be her assistant, her research assistant. So I was taking her class, but I also was working with her on a project outside of that. And just knowing like, wow, she has all these accolades. She's one of the only Black women professors at the institution. And then after I graduated, to see that she was promoted to be the dean of the entire Graduate School of Education, it's like, I just feel so grateful to have been a part of, even met her, even know her, at any level. So there were definitely, even though she wasn't, there was her, and then I didn't have a lot of other Black women mentors. Harvard for me was a lot about friendships, kind of like peer level friendships. That's the way we spent all night in the library. And there were times where several of my friends at the time helped me. Like, I was just crying, like, there's no way I'm going to get this paper done. It's due at 8 a.m. But they're the ones like in the library with me, or like, hey, let me help you with this. Hey, let me help you with that. It was really a lot of peer building. And I believe your peers can be mentors, but it's a little bit of a different relationship. But at every stage of my life, thankfully, there's been someone who is willing to assist me or be a resource for me. No matter, and it's across generations, across race, across all sorts of different boundaries. It has not always been a Black woman. But thankfully, there are people always, and I trust and hope, knock on wood, that there always will be people who will take the time to make sure that I'm doing well and assist me in my efforts.
Yeah. So, you and I met because we both were working in higher education at the time. I still do. But you transitioned and now working in education technology, more so in a corporate space, I would imagine, right? Mm-hmm. So can you talk about kind of, or maybe compare how mentorship kind of existed, or how you experienced it in higher education versus kind of being in a more corporate environment now? Like, is there any differences, or is it kind of the same for you?
No, it's definitely has been different. So When I was in higher education, I thought or assumed incorrectly in some cases that like a direct connection of I am a Black woman, let me find a Black woman, or there are Black women here who are doing good stuff, I want to work with them, I want to be a part of what they're doing. It was not always the case that those were the best mentorships or relationships, period, for me. I would say that, well, I guess in both places, there are ways that people who did not reflect my backgrounds looked out for me.
Yeah.
And those were the ones who I could talk to, who I could share with, and that sort of thing. So in terms of comparing the spaces, I think in higher ed, well, I guess one thing that's similar is that Black women have to work hard to get to where they are, right? To climb up the corporate ladder. If we look at executive level leadership or senior level leadership in corporate, you don't see a lot of Black women faces at a majority of the companies. And same thing, if you look at higher ed leadership, maybe there's some more diversity depending on parts of the country, but by and large, I wouldn't say that Black women are the #1 group being promoted to university presidents or anything like that, or those higher level positions. So I think that in both places, women have to definitely work and be intentional about how they climb the ladders that exist or how they break the barriers that exist. And I think that it sometimes can generate a feeling of threat, or I'm the only person who can, I worked hard to get here and now I have to fight to keep this place. And I cannot bring another Black woman in because they will shatter the whole thing, or they will push me out.
Right, there's not enough space for both of us.
Right. And I don't know. I guess I don't have enough experience on the corporate side to say that same feeling exists. I definitely experienced it on the higher ed side. I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't know enough Black women in higher level positions in corporate to even talk about or have those conversations with. But I do think that both spaces, there are some fundamental benefits if people did seek out mentorship more or were willing to offer it more, because there is enough space, right? There's been enough space for white men for years. Why is there now all of a sudden we have this little tiny pocket and we can't expand? I don't believe that that's the way it should be. So I think in both spaces, especially now, I've recognized that I've had to go outside of Black women in some ways, not outside of Black women, but outside of thinking that Black women are the only folks who can help me. Thankfully, I do have 2 Black women mentors at my current corporate position. And I'm so grateful they take time. They're super busy, but they take time to talk with me, quarterly or whatever. But I also know that there are some white males at my current job who have stuck their neck out for me, who have looked out for me in ways that I'm like, oh, really? Like you see that in me and you're gonna help me? Okay. Like, I had to kind of break that barrier of it's not always like the kinfolk, skinfolk, whatever the quotes are. That's the only way
Kinfolk's not always your kinfolk.
Right, kinfolk are not always kinfolk. And that I don't have to have those specific elements in line to be successful. Now, again, I do want Black women mentors. I do mentor Black women, but I have to also recognize in my own life that, like I said, my first mentor who gave me the first computer, gave me the first bank account, like she was not a Black woman, and she still added tremendous value to my life. So I do think that both spaces require mentors and mentees. I do think it maybe looks a little bit different, but either way, they both need more Black women.
Yeah. Well, can you talk a little bit more about, you just mentioned, you want to be mentored by Black women and you mentor Black women. What are the benefits? What benefits do you see with having a Black woman as your mentor, or you serving as a mentor to other Black women?
So I think there's definitely, similar to the way that anyone who belongs to any set of communities, when you meet someone else who's in that community, you're starting at a higher level. Like you already have some relationship, even if you've lived in different places, you have different everything. There on the fundamental level, there are some experiences that you would expect to be shared. So you can start on a different level, whereas if I'm talking to a white male, his experience and my experience potentially could be very, very different. So I have to say, hey, here's why I wear a bonnet at night, because my hair is this and I can't. Right. Versus if I talk to a Black woman, I'm like, girl, what color's your bonnet? Oh, like she already, we already are starting at a higher connection level, right, because of our shared experiences. And that can be across any group, and regionally or age or whatever else. But specifically with Black women, I know, talking to any other Black women, most likely, now not in all cases, but most likely we share some sort of something, some element, and I can then share, and I can feel honest, I can be vulnerable, I can be candid. I don't have to say like, oh, well, I don't have to sugarcoat things or beat around the bush. I can say, what happened was this, right? And even just like, I think it's hilarious the way that like memes and stuff are made, but there are phrases that we use. There are nonverbal gestures that we use, eye contact at a certain point in a meeting. Both of us know what's going on, you know? So I think there's a different level of maybe comfort or different level of ease that comes when you're mentoring or being mentored by someone from your same community. I also think specifically with Black women, because as I was just talking about, it may be difficult to rise up the ranks. They have gone through those fights. They have seen like, hey, this person and that person are going to try to say this. When they do that, here's what you do, and here's how you get around it, right? So they can tell me specifically how to avoid the mines or the potholes that they may have stepped into or that they avoided because of someone else. So I think that maybe in some cases the advice is that much more relevant, right? Because a white man can tell me how to be successful, but his path might have been very different from my path and what I will face on that same, you know, trying to get to that same place. So I think there's a lot of value in being able to talk and share in an honest and vulnerable and genuine way with someone who may have experienced some of the same things.
Yeah, thank you. So you mentioned that you do a lot of kind of career coaching and helping folks with like resumes and cover letters and that sort of thing. So when you're doing that work, specifically when you're helping other Black women or young Black girls, are there any sorts of kind of like advice that you give that kind of specific to being a Black woman as it pertains to that sort of advice?
Yes, there are definitely some common themes that I see. And there are things I see in myself sometimes too. So when I'm telling somebody else, I'm also telling myself a reminder. I think one of those things are humility. And I think typically humility is a good thing. However, on resumes and cover letters, someone has that one piece of paper to basically judge your whole life on, to judge whether or not you work at this place, whether or not you are capable of doing the job, all those sorts of things. And what I find is the Black women I work with, oh, I can't talk about that, or that was a long time ago, or I didn't really do much for that, or they're not interested in sometimes putting certain positions on their resume, or they're not interested in boosting up their descriptions to make it sound even, and I'm not talking about lying, but saying like, hey, like I did a really good job on that project, or that project was successful because of me. One big thing that I talk with folks about in terms of resumes is talking about outcomes and results. Don't just list your responsibilities. Like anybody can look up a job description and see what those duties are. But no, I want you to say, I increased our customer service satisfaction by 55%. Like that's what I need on a resume. And sometimes I find that Black women are more hesitant to be like, well, it wasn't just me, it was a team effort, or I didn't like, no, because the issue is that if no one's gonna toot your own horn like you can, right? Especially when we're looking at past experiences. No one is going to go back and say, okay, well, was it 55% or 54%? Like no one's, we're not looking at the specifics. So I think having Black women to say like, yes, I did that, to have the confidence level to put those sorts of information on there, because the difference is that folks who are not Black women are putting those things on there. And they already have some extra credit because of their name, right? Because their name is John Smith, right? And not whatever our names are. So there are other factors. Unconscious bias is a huge deal, right? That are already potentially working against us. And then if we want to be shy on our resumes or not have our cover letters be the strongest they could be, we're really counting ourselves out. So I think the humility is good in some spaces, but not on a resume. Like that's the time to toot that horn. Like tell everybody the greatest things you have ever done, because if you have 10 seconds, 30 seconds to get the attention of someone, use it and maximize it. So that's number one. The second thing I see a lot of times is that people, I'll also say another issue is that sometimes women self-select out of jobs. So there is some stat, I forgot where it came from, I have a link to an article, but that men apply when they feel like they're 60% qualified, or they meet 60% of the qualifications, and women won't apply until they meet 100%. So, I think that sometimes we can say like, oh, I'm not ready. Like, or you look at the requirements and it's like, well, I meet 10, but there's 11 requirements there. And it's like, so other people are like, oh, I got 2 of them. Okay, let me slide it.
Right.
So I think that's another level of maybe being humble, or maybe imposter syndrome, thinking less of yourself. But I don't know that we shoot our shot as much as we should. Yeah. Right. I think we are smart, we are brilliant, we are talented. And I think the last point on this is that sometimes I think women don't want to, or Black women I work with don't want to, or don't know how to capitalize on the fact that they have something unique and specific. Like they want to write a resume in the same way that Kelly Clay could write it. But it's like, no, if you're going to be working with Black children, talk about how you are a Black woman and you can connect with them and you can build rapport, you can earn trust a lot faster than maybe someone else coming into those spaces. So how do we, finding maybe professional quote unquote, professional is the whole thing, but professional ways to talk about what we bring to the job. Because I am a Black woman, because I am first generation, because I am this and that, which I'm not first generation necessarily, but using the specific qualities or characteristics of who we are, and then highlighting those on a resume. Because anyone, especially if you have, like, let's say there's 10 people graduating from the same program, they're going to be sending resumes to the same places in the same fields. But what's different about you? How do you use your Blackness? Because as Black people, we have to live in dual realities, right? So I have to know that world and I have to know our world. I have to know what this look means and I have to know what this look means, right? So I'm already like, those are skills that we don't really think about, but like code switching and knowing how to behave in one place and how to behave in another place. Those are skills that are valuable. We just have to figure out how do we capitalize on them? How do we talk about them on a resume? How do I put that? I know how to be different. I know how to adapt in different spaces. How do I put that on a resume? So I would definitely say that I would encourage the Black women I'm working with to not be so humble and to realize, to think even deeper about how being a Black woman in this society and being successful at that thus far, how do you put that on a resume? How do you share that information in interviews? How do you show that you have something unique to bring that no one else can?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, like I said, as you were talking, I'm like, I'm guilty of many of those things, and, it has taken work and working with other people to kind of break myself out of some of those boxes. But I think when you are going, especially if you're, go to college and you're working with these career centers, they're training you a certain way and not necessarily taking your Blackness or your Black womanhood into consideration when they're telling you how to develop a resume, how to write your cover letter, how to interview, what to wear to an interview, like all those things. Let's not even go on natural hair. That's a whole nother conversation.
Right.
That, kind of comes into play when it comes to career coaching and preparation and those sorts of things. So I think that's really important. And I hope that as, a collective, we can kind of start to do better with bringing up young Black women and our peers to not think that. I remember I was working with someone and we were doing a presentation together and something came up about, both of us of course had natural hair, and she mentioned that, when I go on a resume, I put my hair in a certain way. And I remember just like looking at her like, you do? Because, my mind, I'm like, I thought you were proud, you know what I mean? Like, I thought we were like rocking our natural hair and we were proud. And then I didn't realize like you were going through this whole mental turmoil about how to wear your hair for this interview. So I think the more we kind of spread that message, the better we'll kind of overcome some of that imposter syndrome and being having too much humility when it comes to really marketing ourselves. So thanks for sharing that. So as I was thinking about our interview today, I'm like, if anyone knows Jasmine, she is like, knows everybody. She's sharing of herself in so many ways. She's being supportive. She's giving tips. Like she's always trying to like uplift the next person. And I'm just curious of kind of like where that spirit comes from for you and why is it so important for you to share yourself in that way?
Well, thank you for acknowledging that. I'm glad that if that's part of my brand, that's definitely what I would hope. It's very true to me. I think a lot of that comes from the way I was raised. So I have a strong Black woman, beautiful mother. I also have a father who is Nigerian, who came here from Nigeria and kind of had to work his way from the bottom up. I have a great stepmom who has a dentist practice in Minnesota when it wasn't easy to be a Black woman dentist, having your own practice in Minnesota. And so I think that throughout the way I was raised, all three of them, I saw each of them in their different spheres giving back and doing good stuff. And my mom always says, like, be good to people who are good to you, right? So in that, and we also talk about doing good and doing well, right? So how do you do well in terms of life and make money and have a comfortable life, but also how do you do those things while you're doing good, right? So giving back. And there's a quote that I strongly believe in, it's in my email signature, that says, when you get, give, and when you learn, teach. And that is from the wonderful Maya Angelou. And so thinking about, there are so many ways and so many experiences in my life that it's like, that could have went either way. And I think that there's a lot of times that it's like one bad decision could have taken, I could be in a whole different space. I could be incarcerated. I could have been passed away by now. Like there are definitely things that as I was learning, I'm like, I'm thankful it didn't work out like that. Right. And I think that we're all kind of there's just some decisions that are made. And thankfully I've had exposure and experiences to make good decisions that have brought me to where I am. But I think there's but for the grace of God, go I, or something like that. Like at any point your life could could change, it could switch. And so I think that it's important to capitalize on every moment that you have, and every skill, every talent, every gift that I have. I want to make sure that I'm giving it back out, that I'm not just hoarding and saying, okay, now I got all this good stuff. Sorry, everybody else, right? That's not the way I was raised. That's not what I was, that's not the way that I believe even that we should be. I think we all need each other. We're all connected. And so if I'm doing well and you're not doing well, and I have the capacity to help you do well, I feel like I'm a bad person if I'm not. Like, if I'm not, and that's not to say that you have to exhaust yourself and empty yourself. I also believe in self-care and for pouring from a full cup. But if my cup is running over and my sister's is not, then why should I not, assist and help other people? So a lot of that comes from the way that I was raised, seeing my parents all do good work. My mom was doing direct service, so she was helping men and women who were getting out of jail or who were living or homeless, or people who just kind of ended up on the wrong end of life in a lot of spaces. She was praying for them. She was sewing for them. She had a thrift store at one point where she was giving back to the community in that way. My father has always been, he's a lawyer and he's been more corporate, but I've seen him at the scholarship. There's a scholarship in his name at the institution where he went to law school, for example, or he was at the galas and the dinners and kind of giving on a different level in terms than my mom was. He wasn't necessarily always doing the direct service, but he was very active in organizations that were raising money or giving money. And then my stepmother, doing dentistry for folks who maybe couldn't afford it and giving them a break, or she was always volunteering and giving women hygiene products to shelters and those sorts of things. So seeing them all do well in their own capacity, but then also make the time to give back was a huge lesson. And it's something that I always keep in mind, because I don't believe that I got to where I am right now by myself. I know I didn't, right? Like, even going to Harvard, I only applied for Harvard because one of my good friends was like, hey, you should really do it. And I'm like, yeah, right. Like, no, right? So I applied on the last day the application was due. She helped look over my stuff, and I would have never thought about it as being a real possibility had she not even encouraged me to do that. So that has changed my entire trajectory as well, even having Harvard with my name. For good or for bad, people make assumptions from that, but I wouldn't have even done it had someone else not even suggested it in a real way. So I want to be that one, suggesting ideas or saying hey, I know you're at level A, but do you know you could do this and be at level C? Yeah. And I can help you. Can I give you $10 towards getting that, doing that sort of thing? So I think you and I were talking about, sometimes it's just somebody planting a seed. I can say one thing to somebody, or somebody has said one thing to me, and I'm like, you know what? Mm-hmm. And so I think that it takes a series of that, or that's kind of how we come along our journeys, is that people are a part of it at different spaces. They come into your life for different reasons, seasons, and all that stuff, but they ultimately help you get to where you want to be or where you should be. My parents have shown me that, and I believe in because I'm not here alone, and because I didn't get here alone, I have a responsibility to help other people do the same thing.
Yes, I love all that. I agree. So we've talked a lot about kind of different aspects of mentorship, but one thing I really want to use this platform to share the good, of course, but there's also some not so favorable moments or things that happen when folks are in mentoring relationships. And I'm just curious if you've had any of those experiences, what they may have looked like, just kind of, how maybe it impacted the way in which you operate in your mentoring relationships.
Mm-hmm. I would say one of my less positive experiences was in college. I was in the honors program, and I had got a grant to do undergraduate research. And I was assigned a specific mentor, and he was a Black male at the university, someone who I respected. And I'm like, oh, he's really cool. However, I would email him like, hey, can we meet? I would call him, hey, can we meet? We set a time. I went to his office. He's not there. And that was really heartbreaking for me, of hey, wait, you signed up for this program. You said you wanted to do this, and now I can't find you, or you're breaking our promises. I think to stand somebody up is, especially if it's not some kind of dire emergency, you could email and say, hey, I know I'm not going to be there. You knew an hour before that you weren't going to meet me here at this time. So I just felt like that was I felt disrespected. I felt hurt maybe by it. And not even that I had to take it personally, but it's kind of man, I was so excited to work with this person. They have all these publications. They're doing such good work. And then they're not even able to meet with me. We never did meet. I got reassigned to somebody else. But I feel like mentors and mentees both have to have the capacity, right? The time, because otherwise I think it does more damage than if I wanted to make sure that based on that experience, I was always available for my mentees in the future, because I know how it felt for me to have that experience and to be excited and then to be let down in that sort of way. So I think it is something to think about. Do I have the capacity to mentor? And I've done kind of big brother, big sister programs in the past. There was a mentee who I was there to pick her up. I was ready, or she wouldn't be ready, or she wouldn't respond to my things. And it's like, you said you wanted to be this person. And she was 11, so I'm not gonna like blame her, about that. But if she knew that she didn't really want to participate, then I wish that I could have given my time and talent to another child who really needed that or who really wanted that at the time. So I mean, hindsight is 2020, but I would say that the experiences that I've had where they have not been positive is because one or the other has not, one of the sides was not ready for the relationship or didn't have the capacity to do it at that specific time. Any other experiences that I've had with Black women, specifically, I don't count those women to have been my mentors. So I feel like I choose or select people. And I think we can talk all about the mentorship process because you can decide if you want formal mentors or informal. But if I'm going to call someone my mentor, I have observed them. I have watched them in different spaces. There are reasons that I look up to and value them. And on some level, I have reached out to them and they have agreed to like, hey, I'm going to talk to you on a consistent basis. So I'm not let down by people who I'm choosing at this particular moment.
Have there been instances where you wanted a Black woman to be your mentor, but as you were kind of going through your vetting process, changed your mind?
Yes, there have been. Yeah. There have been, or there were times where there's a time where I was starting at a position and I'm like, wow, there's a black woman up here who has been working here for a long time. Like, it's gonna be great, and then it was like, oh, wait, I don't want to be doing that. Like, if someone has to be behaving in a way that I want or I aspire to behave, right? Or I aspire to be. And I saw things that showed me like, well, on paper, this looks really great, but I don't want to have mentors who I think are not upholding the values in their personal lives that I want to live in mine. So if someone is gossiping, if someone is being petty to other people, if someone, is sabotaging other people, that's not who I want to be. That's not what I want. I'd rather, women, thankfully we have the internet, right? I can follow Oprah, I can follow Issa Rae, I can follow I don't need to bring other people into my life if they're not going to be positive influences. So there are definitely times I had to change my mind. But I was always hopeful, like, oh, wow, this is going to be great. But then for whatever reason, I've had situations where I felt like the person who I wanted to be my mentor ended up feeling threatened by me because I was a younger version of them or trying to do the same things that they were. And instead of saying like, hey, let me help you, or hey, we're trying to do the same thing, let's be on the same team, it became an adversarial relationship of like, you're trying to take my place. And you're not going to do it. And it's like, wait, I just got here. Like, that's and I think that's really, it was hard. That was a real big lesson for me because I'm like, happy-go-lucky, like, hey, I'm just here to do my best job. I want to help us all shine. Like, what can I do? Teach me. And for that person to perceive me in that way, it was hard for me because I'm like, I didn't do anything. Like, I just got here. Like, how are you upset with me? And I'm not used to those type of relationships. So it was an opportunity for me to remember that I can't control how other people perceive me. I can't control their behavior. I can't control their insecurities about their own job or their own lives. I have nothing to do with that. And so I had to really separate and step out and say, okay, well, I can work with this person, but this person is not going to be a mentor, or I don't want to be like this person. This person is actually teaching me how not to be. And once I get to that position, I want to make sure that I don't fall into these sorts of traps and end up like that person. So I think, even for those experiences that are not positive, I still learn something from each of them.
Of course. I think sometimes too, and of course, like I said, majority of my background is in higher education, so I don't have too much experience outside of that. But what I've experienced or what I've learned sometimes is that there are other Black women who are maybe a little bit more senior, in the department or the company, how they're perceived by other people. And let's say you do attach yourself with them, then you then kind of take on some of those same, I don't know, people kind of assume you operate the same way that they do, for better or worse. So you kind of have to be careful in that sense. So, recognizing like, okay, this person legit is my mentor and I'm calling them that, and I'm telling people that they're my mentor, that's something that's going to be reflective well on you as well. And not just for the sake of, it's just two black women coming together, for the sake of being two black women,
Right.
So sometimes you have to be mindful of that as well when you're thinking about who do I want to be my mentor. Mm-hmm. So as you were talking, I was just kind of thinking, like, before we get there. So you mentioned kind of, Oprah, Issa Rae, if you needed to kind of go outside of, your circle to get some inspiration and some influence. I guess my question for you is either them, but like whether it's aspirational or real life, like who are some of those like Black girl mentors in your life? And you don't have to say their names if you don't feel comfortable, but just kind of where do you go to kind of seek mentorship?
So that's something I think I'm still working on in some capacities. I look at my life and I'm able to kind of compartmentalize in some ways. So there are people who I look to for finance information. There are people who I look to for personal, like fashion, plus size, how do I look good type of thing. Like so I think that there are multiple areas in my life, and in some places I have mentors, and in some places I don't, or people I look up to or aspire to. In some places I don't, just because no one I know has broken that specific barrier yet. I would say like celebrities, of course, Oprah, Michelle Obama, the Issa Rae. Like I really appreciate people who have come from humble beginnings, who have climbed, but also given back all along the way, right? And so even Issa Rae is an example. She talked about how she put her friends on, right? She didn't go into the industry and say, who's already here? She's like, no, I have talented people across the board already with me, and we are all coming to enter into this industry, right? And so that's exactly what I want to do as I continue to move through different chapters of my life. Like I know amazingly talented people that other people on earth don't know what they do, right? So how can I shine the light on my own friends? How can I use the resources and talents and the people who have held me down? I think there's something to be said that's not positive about people who have people help them to get where they are, and then they get there and then they leave those people. It's like, oh, now let me find my new famous celebrity friends. Right. But where are all the people who were with you shooting hoops in the gym? Like you just left them. And so I feel like, at some point I aspired to be a multimillionaire. I aspired to be, doing great work and with good people. And I want to employ my friends. I want to employ people who are with me, right now. And so some of those other people, like in my actual sphere, there are some. I have two like really good friends, Jordine and Joy, and they are like they're friends, but I also take mentorship from them on some capacity because they have pushed me, they have driven me to say, hey, you're doing this. What about this? Or have you thought about this? Or like Joy specifically has a flow of life about her. Like there are ways that I can be very anxious or very much like, okay, we got to do this, and then we got to do that, and then we got to do this, and she's kind of like. And things like work out perfectly. Like she's living a dream life, but she didn't have to force it or make it happen. So she's one who always reminds me of like, you can just chill and things will still work out how they're supposed to work out. And then Jordine is a friend. She's a consultant. She worked in higher education, now works in tech as well. And so she is always pushing me to say like, hey, you have something of value. Because sometimes I think when we talk about humility or imposter syndrome, there are ways that I'm like, everybody knows this. I mean, like everybody, it's obvious that everyone knows this. And also I think part of that comes from the people who I surround myself with. They are all entrepreneurs, homeowners, very educated, all those things. So I have the false idea that because the lives that they're living, I'm comparing myself to them, and I'm like, well, I'm way behind in terms of what they're doing, but there are plenty of people who don't know the things that I have already learned or been exposed to. So she's a friend who kind of pushes me to say like, hey, remember to share this, or you can do this, or have you thought of starting this, that sort of thing. And then I also have some people, since I moved to Philly, there are so many Black women here doing amazing things, like just so mmany. So now I'm on a real estate journey, and there are women like Aisha Selden, or she goes by the Real Estate Reset. I think her name is Ataya or Atia. I don't even know how to pronounce her name because I've never heard it, but it's Ataya Blair. And they both are like, have tons of homes in Philly. They are making tons of money. They're employing people. They're sharing their secrets on, giving webinars and classes and just free game on their websites. But seeing Black women own property, seeing Black women who are general contractors, seeing Black women who are like, hey, I know what I'm doing in this male-dominated field has been so inspiring for me, because it's like, and they're not doing it just to be rich, and I'm not doing it just to be rich. It's more about, how do I build generational wealth? How do I make sure that we have something to pass on? How do I make sure that when I pass, that my family is going to be okay? If something were unfortunately to happen to me, can I make sure that my family, has what they need to take care of what they need to take care of, right? So it's about building that and about bringing others with you, and it's about our whole community. As a Black community, we have we have so much potential and opportunity, but we need to catch up. We are behind in a lot of ways because you have other folks whose parents and grandparents are leaving them homes, leaving them estates, leaving them trusts, right? And we come into the world sometimes and all we have is like bad credit because our mother used to use our name, you know? And so it's like, how do we have to catch up. So how do we accelerate that process by helping each other instead of fighting each other, right? And there are so many people who I think I've learned about even recently or throughout my time, specifically in real estate, so many people who are like, hey, I have a property. Let me show you what it looks like. Let me walk you through on an Instagram live and show you what I look for when I look at a property. Yeah. That sort of stuff is so valuable to us specifically because we have to kind of catch up where other people are. So I have mentors who I just follow on IG who don't know that they're my mentors, but then I have real life friends, real life people at my job. I have 2 women who I mentioned are Black women who will take the time to chat with me. I have other people who are in the other positions that are not Black women who take the time to chat with me and show me different things. So I'm grateful to have mentors in the professional space, in the real estate space, in my financial literacy space, in my fashion life, in my workout life. Like, I think you need mentors across the board because I'm never gonna be stagnant and complacent, right? There's always another level that I can take it to. And once I take it to that level, now I can show somebody else, hey, you were at the level I was at 2 steps ago. Let me show you how to get here, right? So I feel like, you know, on the board games, how you kind of move up one piece, you move up one piece. Like, if I'm doing that and I'm breaking the barriers and I'm paving the way, so I should make sure that someone else is right behind me, making those same moves because we can all win. Like, there's enough for all of us. If you think about like all the money in the world sometimes, which is why I'm thankful for the job that I have, because I was able to see people who were living at a totally different quality of life than I had ever experienced before. One of my coworkers has a towel warmer in his bathroom, and it's like, you paid hundreds of dollars. You pop the towel in there before you get in the shower, and you come out and it's all warm and comfy. Right. I'm like, that's nice. Like, I would have never thought to spend money on that, but now that I know that exists and that it's within my price range, maybe I want that. Right. But had I not had like coworkers who kind of exposed me to those kind of ideas, I wouldn't have ever known. So I'm thankful that the path is being made and I'm being exposed, and I'm realizing there's a lot of money in this world. Like, why are we fighting over these pennies when people have billions? And we could be one of those people. And then my goal is that once I do have, you know, the wealth or the money that I aspire to have, I want to be a philanthropist. And that's what I do now. I also believe that through different circumstances, you just become more of who you are, right? So I think that during quarantine, people are becoming more of who they are. They were already high capacity go-getters, watching all the webinars, doing all the things. They're doing more of that. If they were not, they're doing more of that. So as I have more money, the things that I would do with $1,000, which is maybe I give 10% of it, I save some of it, I do whatever. I feel like those are the same things I'm gonna do with $3 million. I'm still gonna give a percentage, I'm still gonna do that. So I wanna have those things, not just for me, but so I can really support and invest in other people who are doing things, right? So it's still, I'm still learning from others for the purpose of giving back to others on some level.
I love that. So we're coming to an end, but I do have a question for you. If there was one tip that you could give to someone else about how to be an effective Black girl mentor, like how do you kind of start creating those connections and making those sorts of impacts on others? Like, what would it be? Like, what advice would you give someone else?
My number one piece of advice in terms of being a successful mentor is to listen, which I think is cliche, and I think we talk about it all the time, but if we look up the tenets of actual active listening, I think it's different than just be like, yeah, girl, I heard what you said. Like, no, did you hear, right? Did you hear, and did you put that information together with the rest of the context to understand what's maybe not being said, right? Because there are times, I'm sure all of us have experienced, like, someone asking you, you know, girl, are you okay? It's like, yeah, I'm fine. You know, like, but knowing that fine does not mean you are actually fine, and there are some other questions that need to be asked, right? So listening is a big part of building the foundation of a relationship, because if in the beginning, when I first meet you, if I feel like you're listening to me, you know, I can share things, you're not judging, you know, based on your facial expressions or your responses to what I say, then I feel like when I am in deep, deep trouble, I can now come to you because I know you're going to listen before you judge. I know you're going to give quality advice, but also that you're going to give advice when I want advice. And not just like, hey, let me tell you how to do A, B, and C, because that's what I did, A, B, and C, because that may not be the same context, and you may not be ready to hear what I have to say in that way. So I think listening is the foundation of a positive mentorship relationship. And both sides will at some point be listeners and both be, you know, giving information, right? So it's a balance, and that's how you can exchange information in a way that feels good to both people, feels authentic, and that is beneficial to both people, so that when you do talk, you are saying stuff that's relevant. No one wants to hear somebody go on and on about stuff that they don't know what they're talking about or doesn't apply to their situation. You want to make sure that you listen so that you can give the best advice or guidance, or sometimes people just need somebody to listen. I think there are so many opportunities that we miss in our daily lives where I just needed to say that. I just needed to get it off my chest, get it out my mouth, right? And you're not asking for advice, you're not asking for help, you just needed to say it. And so I think listening builds a foundation where people can feel comfortable venting, but also asking for advice, and also, asking for things that they don't know they need yet. So the mentor can kind of say like, oh, I see you're missing, you have A and C, but you're missing B. Let me share you how I did that, or let me, share what I know, or let me connect you with someone who does know how to help you get to B. But it starts off with listening.
Yeah. Yes, I totally agree. So as we close out here, I want to ask you, what is your mentor moment? And when I say that, I'm talking about maybe a moment in your life where either you were being mentored or maybe you mentored somebody else, but that really was impactful for you, something that like stays with you as you go, through your life.
Sure. So while I was at NC State, I met a lovely young lady who is like a little sister to me, which is very important because I'm an only child. So I didn't grow up kind of having those peer-like female relationship sort of things, but she would call me her big sister. And there was a time where she would, hang around in my office or, talk to me about different stuff. But there's a time when she was asking me about how to use a tampon because she just had never done that before, and she didn't feel comfortable. She had sisters, but she didn't feel comfortable talking to them about it. Of course, she has a mother, but didn't feel comfortable talking to her about it either. And I was just so touched and so honored that, like, wow, she felt comfortable enough to come and talk to me about something so personal, and for other people, like, they started using them when they were 12, like they already know it's just something that's kind of second nature. Right. But for her to be at the age that she was and be like, I just don't know this and I don't know who to ask. Well, Jasmine is the best person who I trust to do that. And I felt just like honored that she would perceive me in that way. And it also reminded me like, okay, well, people are paying attention. Like, let me make sure I'm living my life in the way that is intentional and that I want to, because people are watching, right? And making judgments or deciding, what to share, what not to share based on what they see of me, their perception of me. So that was something that at least she and I are still very close to this day. So I'm grateful for her presence in my life and continuing to trust me with things that she doesn't feel like maybe she wants to chat with other people about. And so we're close enough in age that I'm experiencing some things that she will probably experience very soon in life. And so I'm also trying to, like, when I'm going through these things and I'm telling her about them, like, let me be vulnerable. Let me say, hey, I don't have the answers to this. Like, this is happening. I don't know what to do. I'm going to figure it out. And when I do, I'll share it with you. But just to show I don't know that the people who I've seen mentor in my life, I don't know that I always was able to see them in their vulnerability, right? And I think that's a huge missed opportunity, because sometimes when we look at mentorship mentee, and it's kind of like, oh, well, XYZ, this mentor has it all together. I've never seen them struggle. They never had to, but they have their moments too. So I really hope moving forward that I am always showing vulnerability and that candidacy in that way, but that also that I find more mentors who are open to say, I'm figuring this out, or I'm sad today. Like, I know you call me for advice, but I'm sad. I need to share some sort of things. So I think that builds the intimacy, that builds the bond of both people knowing that we're both human, we're both flawed, we're both just trying to make it to the next day and make the best moves possible for us and our families. And so that moment, with her was very powerful for me, because I felt like she was being very vulnerable in that moment and I could respond. And thankfully, it's something I knew. So it was within my capacity to say like, hey, here's all the answers to that. That's nothing, like I didn't have to make it a big deal or make her feel awkward about it. And I was able to provide resources that were helping to her. So that's my mentor moment.
And as minor as that may seem, like that mentorship you gave her in that moment, I'm sure has changed her life,
Yes, literally, like literally the way that she handles something every month. Right. I'm grateful.
Well, Jasmine, is there anything else you would like to share before we close out today?
I think the only thing I would say is just related to the point I was just mentioning about being vulnerable and being genuine and being authentic. I think that there, of course, are formal mentorship programs and things like that, but I would hate for Black women specifically to think, oh, I don't have anything to offer, or I'm not in that specific position yet. So how can I mentor somebody when I haven't done this, or I'm not this XYZ yet? And I would say that we all, just by virtue of living our lives, all of us who are making it through every day in this quarantine, all of us who are, you know, doing anything, we have something to offer. There's always somebody who could learn from the insight and the experience that we are going through right now. So similar to with the job positions, I would say don't wait until you feel like you have it together to feel like you can mentor somebody, because even with somebody watching you struggle, that's still teaching them something, right? And so to know that we are always living lives that are valuable and that are insightful and that can help others at any given moment. So I would always encourage people to take the opportunity to be a mentee, to be learning, to be a resource, and to be also be a mentor, and know that it's a symbiotic relationship, you know, that both parties are giving and receiving at the same times.
You're amazing.
So are you.
Thank you very much. So if people want to connect with you, Jasmine, what's the best way they can get in contact?
Sure. Well, I will give my email address, which is jasmineomo@gmail.com. I can also be found on Facebook. Those accounts are personal. I'll probably have more professional ones at some point, but my personal blogs are J-A-Z, Cherie Amour, which is CHERIE-AMOUR, or I'm on IG at j.cherie_amour.
And I'll put all those in the description box so people can get to it. Well, thank you so much for spending your afternoon with me. This has been amazing and refreshing, especially, you know, in times of quarantine, just to kind of think about, you know, the ways in which we impact others, the way in which we connect with others. I think especially now because we are so, I don't like to say isolated, but we're so distanced from one another physically. Maintaining those types of relationships are important. So I think having this sort of conversation for people to really get an understanding of, okay, well, you know, we don't know how long we'll be in this space. So how can we continue those relationships? How can we cultivate new ones, you know? So I think you've been able to share a lot with us today. So I thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wiggins. It's been my pleasure. I look forward to supporting Black Girl Mentor up and down all across the country.
Thank you. I'm trying. All right. Take care.
You too.
This episode was sponsored by Parting Ways Logistics Trucking. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the last few months have been trying times for much of the world. However, through the dedication of trucking companies like Parting Ways Logistics, communities across the nation have had access to essential provisions throughout these devastating times. Parting Ways Logistics Trucking, dependable, professional, and dedicated.